Hi, my name's Gary Cole. Welcome to the Football Coaching Life, a podcast brought to you by Football Coaches Australia and Making Media, the podcast professionals. The Football Coaching Life is about the stories of Australia's men and women coaches, the people we entrust with developing our players and our teams. What we found is, in the main, these stories haven't been told. Today, we're honoured to have Alen Stajcic, who's the new head coach of the Philippines women's national team. I'm going to come back to their nickname a little while later, but let's introduce Alen properly. Alen played for the Australian schoolboys as a junior. His senior football was played in the New South Wales Premier League with Bonnyrigg White Eagles, Bankstown City Lions and Sutherland Sharks. Coaching career, not quite sure of the order of this stage, so I'm sure we'll tick these boxes as we go through. But coached at the Hill Sports High in the football program, which has helped develop some wonderful players over the journey. 11 years at the New South Wales Institute of Sport, coaching the New South Wales Sapphires to a couple of championships there in the old WNSL. Assistant coach at the Young Matildas at the 2006 World Cup in Russia. And then, of course, the inaugural head coach of Sydney FC A-League Women. Got to getting that right. We had a wonderful time, qualified for the finals every year, 2 championships, 2 premierships, and 3rd place at the FIFA International Women's Club Championship. And then that wonderful 5-year stint as head coach of the Matildas, during which they were finalists in the Asian Cup in 2014, 2018, quarterfinals of the World Cup in 2015, quarterfinals at the Olympics in 2016, won the Tournament of Nations in 2017, and then, of course, qualified for the 2019 World Cup, and at the time taking the Matildas to 4th ranked in the world, the highest position they've ever been in. And then most recently, head coach of the A-League men at Central Coast Mariners, where he had 2 fantastic seasons, last year finishing in 3rd place with a number of the players coming on. Alu Kual headed off to VfB Stuttgart in the Bundesliga. Rion Tonic and Oli Bozanic in the team of the season, along with Matt Simon and Mark Birighitti on the bench. And recently resigned and is now contracted as head coach of the Philippines women's national team. Welcome, Alen Stajcic.
Thanks, guys. That was the longest intro in history. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's it, mate. You've had far too much success on your journey. You know, that's it's good that we introduce people properly. Thanks for coming along, Al. We really appreciate you making the time. I know you want to fill us in about where you're at, because I know you're about to head off to meet some of your new players.
Yeah, really excited actually. So just been packing and meeting with some of the players and the team management over the last week or so. So leave on Sunday, 2 days time, and get ready for the long journey. We got 2 months in Los Angeles preparing as a team together, and then we leave straight from LA to go to India, to go to Mumbai, to the Asian Cup, and fingers crossed everything goes well, and we prepare well and play well and qualify for our first World Cup in history.
Yeah, I guess you've been busy doing some research on the playing group. I saw that they really haven't played like a lot of teams since 2019, which is a while, ranked 65th in the world. How much, Al, about women's football in the Philippines did you know before you took on this gig and did your research? Because I know you're taking Noel Arate with you as well.
Yeah, I'm taking Luca as well, Luca Tonetti, who was our strength and conditioning coach at the Mariners as well. So, great to be able to bring along two fantastic professionals along with us on the journey. And, that's going to add, it's really going to complement what we take over and bring with us to the players over there, when we get there to LA. But, look, funnily enough, they were in the last Asian Cup, and that was the first Asian Cup that Philippines had qualified for, probably getting close to 20-odd years. And they were in the other group, and obviously doing our scouting at the tournament, the other group played on alternative days. So, we just happened to go out and watch all their games, actually, all their 3 or 4 matches that they played. And, going into the tournament, I thought they would really struggle. I thought they were going to get beaten by big scores, having not had a lot of senior international experience in that period of time at youth or senior level. I hadn't really seen much of the Philippines, but they really surprised me. They were at a sort of moderate level. But you could see there was a lot of room there for potential. They competed well. I think they lost 3-0 to China. They lost 4-1 to Thailand. They beat Jordan. and then in a playoff match lost to South Korea 5-0. But certainly they showed enough that they can compete with some of the stronger teams of Asia. And in women's football, especially back 3 or 4 years ago, Asia was, if not equally, the strongest continent in the world, certainly the second strongest, just behind Europe. Europe's probably got a little bit more depth, but when you looked at the world rankings, Australia, Japan, North Korea were all ranked in the top 10. Japan had won the 2011 World Cup and silver medalists at 2012 Olympics and World Cup finalists in 2015. So we're talking about really strong continent. And, the Philippines showed in 2018 that at their first tournament, they were at a good level. And, we all know these things take time, development and matches. And the more matches they play, the more tournaments they play as a group, the better they're going to get. So, hopefully the three of us can come along and just add a little bit of experience from tournament football and preparation football, and give them that little edge to again, as I said earlier, hopefully qualify for their first World Cup in history. Yeah,
well, good luck, mate. We certainly wish you all the very best of luck there. Al, historically, the Philippines have had a strong connection with America and American sport. The players go in through the American college system to play football, and then maybe play in the women's competition over there.
Yeah, look, I think there's a little bit of a history of that, and there's a lot of players there who are possibly first generation Americans as well. But anyone, as we've seen with the Socceroos just recently, we've got Martin Boyle in the team and Harry Suter in the team and Karacic as well. So, we've got guys who have got those ties to Australia. And, I have to say, watching the Socceroos in the last couple of games, Martin Boyle's probably been one of my favourite players to watch. And Gianni just signed up for that. I saw he was picked in the Socceroos today as well. So really happy for him and proud that he's been selected in that team as well. But, the way Martin Boyle plays with the passion and pride of our Aussie jersey, it just makes you proud to watch the game, and that he has the connection to us as a country and want to represent our country. So, relating that back to the Philippines, anyone who wants to wear that jersey and wear that jersey with pride, is going to do the whole country proud and ensure that there's a legacy left, both wherever it is across the world, but especially in the Philippines for young kids to have someone to aspire to and someone to follow, and have that journey of being a football fan as well.
Yeah. All right, let's roll the clock back a little bit. Not that we want to spend too much time talking about your playing career, but normally that's where that's where we fall in love with the game. Where did you play your junior football?
Yeah, look, I grew up in Sydney. I was born in Blacktown, so the heartland of football, and being a first generation Aussie as well, with parents from the Balkans, that you had football ingrained in you from the time you were born. So like most other kids around the area, we all took up football, and it was our passion and our religion. And I was very lucky to have so many strong clubs out in the western suburbs of Sydney, and being born in that 72, 73, 74 age group, there was a lot of first generation Aussies who were similarly taking up the game and playing with the same kind of passion as well. So, it was a pretty strong age group, and so many strong clubs around there within youth football. Blacktown Cities and Sydney Croatia were particularly strong at the time. Melita was strong at the time. So, Sydney Olympics and Arpias, they were all breeding grounds for these first generation of Aussies that were coming through the ranks and starting their footballing journey.
Yeah. And now, how was your transition from playing into coaching? How did that come about?
Yeah, look, my playing career probably took a little bit of a hit, after National Youth League and went back to the NPL, and that was, a bit of a kick in the guts, as it is for most players who don't make that transition at that point. And at that point, I did an ACL as well, so I was out for 8 or 9 months, and then had another one when I was 24. So in that time, I was undertaking a teaching degree, and started becoming a high school PE teacher. And even as part of that journey, I quickly siphoned off into the football element, became the New South Wales schoolboys coach and the New South Wales schoolgirls coach. I used to go to all the schools tournaments and, identified a lot of talent through that pathway. And while I was injured, as well. I did all my coaching licenses. So even from an early age of 21, 22, I'd done my level 1, level 2. And I think by the time I was 25, I'd started doing my level 3 down at the AIS with Jim Selby. So, I really wanted that connection back to the game, and didn't probably get what I wanted to out of my playing career, but, certainly wanted to be in touch with the game and have that real connection and input into the game. And I really found my feet in coaching. I loved it from the first time I did it. My state team that I was a part of when I was a kid, from New South Wales 13s through to 16s or 17s, for some reason or other, we were always the guinea pigs for, Casey DeBruin and David Lee's coaching courses. We had Casey, berating us as players, but he was also berating the coach. But I just remember being one of those kids, going, I think I could do that. I'd love to do that, and that really planted a seed in me for wanting to be a coach early on, and trying to help the game out. And as I said, by the time I was 23, 24, I'd already done all my badges, and fell into those schoolboy and schoolgirl roles. And by the time I was 27, 28, one of my friends, Paul Ben Velsen, just happened to be interim TD at Football New South Wales, and one day rang me after a game when I was playing out at Sutherland and said, "Can you come and help me out? We need a coach to fill in the New South Wales Institute of Sport Women's program." And I said, "Sure, I'll help you out for a month or so." I'm still playing. That month turned out to be 12 years. So.
What a remarkable journey! There's a couple of things about your journey thus far, Al. It's incredible in talking with coaches here, just how many successful coaches have had a part of their journey in teaching. And I guess for me, and I'll be interested in your thoughts there, that, is coaching teaching? Is that what it is? It's obviously more than that nowadays, but teaching plays such an important role in the education of players. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, look, everyone's got their own journey, and everyone's got their own experiences that they bring to the table. And I guess there's pluses and minuses of every different experience when you go into coaching. Having played 100 internationals and played A-League or Premier League would give you, the experience of playing in big matches and playing against big opponents, and, obviously a higher level of coaching and opponents and teammates, and, so much experience you would have gained and knowledge from all those experiences. And then, I guess there's people who, maybe have followed my pathway, who have come from education backgrounds, maybe played at semi-decent levels and had a little bit of playing experience, but had more of the education background, and I guess almost fell into the game as being fans rather than experienced players. And they've both got their worth. They've both got their value. Ultimately, it's what you bring to the table when you get into those coaching roles. And, particularly that first role at the New South Wales Institute of Sport, it was more of a talent ID and talent development role for the Matildas. So the age span was initially 15 to 17, 18. So it really did fall into that education category, and trying to, prepare these players to become the next Matildas and the next world-class players to represent Australia. So, that was my sort of starting point, I guess, in elite football coaching. But definitely education background helped, trying to work with players and different learning styles, and having all those things that you deal with day to day that you sometimes take for granted really help, I guess, when you're out on the training pitch.
How important were those 11 years at NSWIS and the work that you were doing there in terms of helping you to grow as a coach? I'm guessing you might have made the odd mistake or two, like many of us in those early days.
Yeah, everyone makes mistakes, but I guess the best thing about the New South Wales Institute of Sport was it wasn't a football organisation; it was an elite sports organisation. And I look on those days fondly, and learnt so much from our CEO and our 2IC, Charles Turner and Claire Prideaux. Charles had played water polo for Australia, and Claire was an excellent hockey player. So just to be in an environment like NSWIS that's catering for gold medalists and world champions, and it's something that football had never even reached. Our pinnacle at that time was trying to qualify for the World Cup.
Yeah.
Yet other sports' pinnacle was trying to win the gold medal at the Olympics. And it really changed my mindset. I really see the inferiority complex we always talk about in football here in Australia, how everything's great all around the world, but everything we do is at a lower level when I don't think that's the case. And
Yeah.
I moved through those 10 years, and very quickly, by the second or third year, my goals, were not for us, the Matildas or the Socceroos, to qualify for World Cups, but it was to win. What do we have to do to find players and prepare players to win World Cups? And, that's something I've taken with me all the way through my life. And, when I got to the Matildas role, the discussion and the conversation from the starting point was not how do we get to quarters, how do we get to the World Cup, well, how are we going to win this World Cup? And that was ingrained with me by being around coaches and players who had already won gold medals and world championships at their respective sports.
Yeah. And when you got to that role in the Matildas, I'm guessing you were reconnecting with a number of the women that you'd helped develop as a part of that journey through N-Swiss and the Young Matildas.
Yeah, look, that was, definitely. And obviously at Sydney FC as well, I'd coached a lot of those players.
Yeah.
So almost everyone in the team at some point I'd crossed paths with, either at Young Matildas level, being the head coach there for 3 or 4 years, through Sydney FC, or through the New South Wales Institute of Sport. There's probably only maybe 4 or 5 players who I hadn't directly coached at some point. But I guess that presented a lot of positives, but also the challenge. For the ones who I hadn't, like a lot of those girls I'd coached probably for 6, 7, 8, 10 years. So obviously very, very close bonds and relationships. And then there's some that I hadn't coached, and then just trying to sort of separate myself from being in that new role, a little bit almost like a player going from player to coach, separating yourself from the group and showing that sort of neutrality and that impartiality that you need to show that sort of fairness and transparency across the group. So, especially in that first 6 months, I was extremely mindful of not trying to show any favoritism and trying to just show that I was there to represent the whole country. And, especially Sydney and Brisbane clashes in that old W League, the old massive derbies in the early days of W League. So, just trying to remove yourself from that role and reimpose yourself in the new role and try and embrace the whole team was really important to me.
Yeah. And you did a wonderful job in that role, mate, and helped move the brand of the Matildas into a new realm, and obviously the ranking kept climbing as well. So all power to you. Now, on your journey, was there a coach or coaches that had this a significant influence on you being a coach or growing as a coach?
Look, probably as a young player, and I guess in the New South Wales state teams, the person who had the biggest influence on me as a player and the most I probably learnt as a player was David Lee. God rest his soul. So he was extremely organised, dedicated, was a visionary, I guess, for his time. I saw a couple of comments about Eric Worthington the other day on that little chat group, but David Lee was certainly a pioneer of modern day coaching and football practices. Casey De Bruin was obviously very closely linked to him in those early days in coaching courses and stuff. And I think they were definitely two of the pioneers in Sydney-based playing and coaching. I know that David Lee had a massive influence on people like Trevor Morgan, who's now the national TD, and Kelly Cross and Oscar Gonzalez and other people who were all part of that sort of Sydney group. So, David Lee was definitely one of the coaches who sort of first had a massive impact on my upbringing and my football education. But, as I went along, there were so many coaches that I just tried to pick their brains and see how they ran things. I was always a big fan of Kelly Cross. He used to train the New South Wales Institute of Sport boys program on the next field at Valentine Park. And, I'd always casually just watch his sessions and the kind of information that he was sending and the way that he went about it. But I guess as I got older, I was really attracted to Bielsa and the style and the aggression and the discipline that his teams had. So, when I moved beyond sort of our local and community level, I've loved watching his teams play. And, I've even used a lot of the clips from Leeds in the last couple of years as tools to sort of show other teams of, philosophies and ways we want to go about playing and mentality within a playing group and playing style.
Yeah, he's done some remarkable things, albeit they haven't hit their straps just at the moment in the EPL, have they?
They haven't hit their straps, but you can just see that. I just love seeing teams with a playing style and a philosophy, and you can see that everyone's pulling in the same direction. And really, they've still come up with pretty much the team they came up with from the championship. And I'm not a Leeds fan, but I love watching them play. I love the aggression. I love the man. Orientation in their defensive principles. I love the fact that they attack with speed, and it's just 100% energy. And considering that they haven't invested in their squad, for them to even survive in the Premier League, I think is a massive accomplishment. And they're down the bottom at the moment, but I'm hoping they stay up and can add to their squad and can challenge in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Al, I was listening to a podcast a few months ago now, nothing to do with sport. It was actually about business, and the people were talking about the difference between aspiration and capability. And I thought that's a really good question for football coaches, because obviously we've got a philosophy. Everyone's got this philosophy about how they want to play. And then at a particular time, you inherit a team or a group of players that are at this place, and we want to move them to somewhere else. How do you deal with that of taking? And maybe that's applicable now. That you've got the Philippines ranked 65th in the world, and obviously they want to qualify for the first World Cup. How do you make that work from going? This is the group that we've got. This is the we want to be aspirational here, but if we're ruefully honest right now, this is the capability of the group, and how do we help them to move forward?
Yeah, look, it's a excellent question, and I guess I can only reflect on the experiences that I've lived. When I was at the New South Wales Institute of Sport, when I first started in 2002, we only had one Matilda in our squad and two players in the young Matilda squad. And for me, for a New South Wales group who traditionally are the strongest and biggest state in Australia in terms of football, I thought that was a pretty poor representation of our state. And I quickly set about resetting the goals of the program for us to become the dominant state and really start producing the results of what we should. There was a lot of investment going into the program, and I wanted us to be the biggest and strongest state and make up the biggest portion of each national team. And that meant to the playing group that our behaviours needed to reflect that, from talent ID to the way we prepared ourselves, to the mentality we took to training, the level of training, all reflected us not only wanting to be in the national team, but once we get there, make sure that we're the leaders in the group, we're the best players in the group, and we can pull our nation from being ranked 12 or 13 and not qualifying for things to becoming one of the leaders in the world game. So I've sort of taken that philosophy all the way through. As I said, when I started at the Matildas, the first day was, I think at the time we were ranked 9 or 10. The goal from the outset was, how do we reach the top 3? How do we get on the podium and really put ourselves in with a chance of winning every major tournament? We might win, we might lose, but how do we prepare ourselves and give ourselves every possibility of reaching the top 3? And I thought that was a realistic goal. And obviously, talk's talk and talk's cheap. But when you set goals like that and such a high bar, it's incumbent upon everyone within that group to have that alignment, to pull in the direction on and off the pitch to try and attain that goal. And at the Mariners, very similar. And not only did we have, I think, great leadership with our staff last year, but we had a great leadership group with the players who really set about the ambition of setting new marks for the team. And especially, I like to reflect on the history of each club or group and ensure that they know where we've come from, where we are, and then as a group, where do we want to get to? And that's easy for me to say we want to be number 3, but that has to be, a group goal. That has to be a group dynamic. And how do we arrive at this place? And, people like Oliver Zanic and Matt Simon were instrumental in us setting a new bar last year. And our behaviours on and off the pitch really reflected that. And whether that makes you come first or second or third, I'm not sure. But I am pretty sure it has a good impact on the mentality and behaviours in a group to help you move in that direction.
And those behaviours, that is the culture, isn't it? It can be all manner of different things. You can put posters on the wall and words on bits of paper, but essentially the behaviours that we do, the behaviours that are acceptable, the behaviours we walk past, that's where the culture really lives.
Yeah, look, there's so many comments about culture, isn't there? And one of my favourite ones is, whether you like it or not, every team has a culture.
Yeah.
And it simply is the collection of everyone's behaviours at that time that will decide what that culture is. And ultimately, you can always make excuses for your culture. You can always make excuses for lack of facilities, lack of money, lack of this, lack of that. But ultimately, it's your mentality and your behaviours that you bring to the table as a group that will determine what that culture becomes and how it evolves and how it grows, and who can grow within that culture. Who's accepted within that culture, who thrives within that culture. And when you look at, I've loved sport my whole life, but when you look at special group dynamics, you can easily look at, whatever Fergie did at Manchester United over such a long time. Most players who went there were at their peak at the time they were at Man United, and then wherever they came or wherever they went after, some obviously, were better after and whatever, but at that time they were all at their peak. And Melbourne Storm here in the NRL, pretty much whoever goes there and works with Craig Bellamy, for whatever reason, is it leadership? Is it his leadership? Is it other players within the group? Is it a collection of all, players who go there just happen to play at their peak for the period that they're there? And that's something special that good teams and good clubs and good countries find a way to have, and the best ones find a way to maintain it.
Yeah. Al, we could have a podcast series on developing culture, but we don't have time to do that right now. I'm sure the listeners out there would love me to ask you. So if you can do this simply, how do you, because I'm going to guess that taking over a brand new team in the Philippines national team, that the development and building of a culture there is going to be really, really important. What have you found the things that you're going to look to do initially to make sure that culture's bright and bubbly and moving in the right direction?
Yeah, look, again, I've got to embrace what their history has been in the last 3 or 4 years. And I've spent the last 2-3 weeks already meeting with as many players as I can and staff to find out, what their recent experiences have been, especially within the national team, but also as individuals. I think it's important for us to embrace whatever their cultures are. That's going to be a big challenge for us to ensure that, we're aligned with what their national team culture already is, and add value to that rather than, throw everything out, throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are obviously positives within the group, and immersing ourselves within their culture and finding a way to get the best out of each individual. We've really worked hard already at getting to know as many players as we can. And for me, that's the key, that one-on-one interaction and finding out what makes each individual within the staff and the playing group tick, and how can we get them to the best possible level within a short space of time. I think they're the critical elements, finding out about each individual, how we're going to cater for each individual, and ultimately how we're going to bring that person into the group to get the best out of them within the group, and then maximize the level of the group as well.
Yeah, sounds good. And again, we wish you all power with all of that. Staj, how has your coaching changed or developed over your journey?
Look, that's a good question. I've always been pretty proactive with the attacking side of the game. I think over the last 4 or 5 years, I've become even more, I guess, pragmatic and organised and structured around our BPO, and the connection of that, especially in transition. When I went to the Mariners, obviously they were a team who conceded a lot of goals, and then just trying to really evolve that part of the game. And I have to say, in the last 2 years, I've probably learned more about myself and coaching than I had in the previous 10 years, just simply due to not being in my comfort zone. Having been around the same players for such a long time.
Yeah.
And not that it was a comfort zone, but just knowing the players so well. Having known the players from age 14, 15 through to 24, 25, 27, 30 years of age. We knew each other inside out in terms of, what they were going to do on the pitch and how they were going to act and what their tools were that they brought. But, coming into an environment and a team that had leaked so many goals, it was very important for us to have a consistent structure, and one that that could, resist the big teams like Sydney's and Melbourne Cities, who had so many attacking weapons. So, it's definitely a part of, my coaching in the last couple of years that I think's evolved really well. But I think the most important parts of coaching are probably not the football aspects, they're the non-football aspects. Really ensuring that you have a harmonious group, a group that, is aligned, a group that's together, a group that's willing to fight for each other, and ensuring that there is that connectivity, within the group, within the staff, within the playing group to try and find the best, again, I said the same thing before, trying to get the best out of everyone for when the crucial moments come along and we can all perform under pressure.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said you probably learned as much in the last 12 months as you had prior to that. Is it fair to say that when you lose as a coach, there's a great learning opportunity there all the time? So when you have a season when there are a lot more losses than wins, it's an incredible opportunity to learn. That the dilemma for us as coaches is, though, at the professional level, the more losses you have, the closer you probably come to losing your gig, which is, it's almost doesn't make sense, but we do understand how that works. Do you think that's a fair summary of that as well? Is that's where the learning is in the losing?
Yeah, look, it's definitely a big part of it. For whatever reason, as I said, I started at 2002 at New South Wales and Sydney FC and the Matildas, and pretty much all those environments. And you even mentioned Hill Sports High. I'd had a run of 16 or 17 years where basically all those teams were winning teams. We made the finals every year with Sydney, whether we came first or second. With the N-Swiss team, we'd always win the local domestic comps. With the Matildas, we were pretty successful year on, year out. Even at Hill Sports High, both in the boys and girls football programs, we basically made the final every year for about 8 or 9 years straight. So I was always in a winning environment. Not that I didn't learn within that environment, but certainly going to the Mariners and going to the A-League, where I didn't have a strong connection with anyone or the environment other than being a fan. There was so much learning that took place. And, during that COVID break in that first year, I certainly did a lot of reflecting about what I could have done, what I should have done. If I do survive, what I'm going to do when I get back. And basically from that point onwards, even that post-COVID break, I think we had 1 loss, 1 win and 2 draws. For me, it's sowed the seeds of things that we needed to do when we came back the following pre-season. And we took a lot of that on board. Noel and I worked really hard. Our small but limited coaching staff, worked extremely hard to give the players the environment that we thought we needed to give them the best chance of performing. And as I said, along with the leadership group, along with all the other facets around the team, I thought we did a really good job.
Yeah, no, you did. It was great, and it was great to watch them play. Some of the football was absolutely fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, mate. Have you ever had a formal coaching mentor? You spoke about David Lee. Have you ever had someone that's you've got on the end of the phone and you can regularly talk through coaching?
Not in terms of football. Probably my best sounding board is Noel. Been with me now for 4 years, maybe even a touch longer. He's a very passionate, knowledgeable, and experienced guy as well. And behind closed doors, even at Mariners last year, we were driving together 2 hours backward and forward each trip. 90 minutes of that 120 minutes was basically discussing and talking about the team and what we did at training and what we can do better. And it was 42 weeks of productive discussions in the car about how we both need to improve. So, but he was probably the best sounding board. We both, had an immense passion for trying to do better and trying to improve the environment. Yeah. So, he's probably been the best sounding board in recent times. I've had one guy who I talked to, in terms of leadership and culture and all that, a non-football person. Yeah. And he's been a good mentor for me. But from a football perspective, I'd say Naz has probably been the best one over the last few years.
Yeah, it's great when you've got someone that you can trust and you've got one another's own, best interests at heart, and you can have good, honest, frank discussions to bounce things off, isn't it?
Yeah. Definitely, 100%.
You're listening to the Football Coaching Life, a podcast brought to you by Football Coaches Australia and Making Media, the podcast professionals. Today we've got a wonderful guest in Alen Stajcic, who's currently the head coach of the women's national team in the Philippines, having a great conversation about his coaching journey. Al, you mentioned your time at NSWIS. I was also fortunate to work at the AIS for a couple of years with Ronnie Smith. And one of the things that I loved about being in that environment was this vast array of different sports and coaches from different sports. And they would regularly have catch-ups where they'd bounce coaching things off of one another. How do you guys do this? How do you do this? A lot of that was to do with management and perhaps leadership. Obviously, things differed technically, but have you found benefit in talking with coaches from outside of football?
Incredible benefit. As I said, it was the best time of my coaching life at New South Wales Institute of Sport. Having, as I said, the leadership, but the cohort of coaches that we had, from water polo to gymnastics to hockey. Had a couple of close friends who were in the hockey program, and back then it was even interesting. You said there's not much correlation tactically, but back then even the hockey program had removed, or hockey had removed, the offside rule and the impact that had on defending. And I remember those discussions vividly, about them defending in front rather than from behind, knowing they had no protection with a line behind. And, football wasn't as big on blocking passing lanes and all that back then. There was a little bit of talk of that, but it wasn't as overt as it is now. And, a lot of the principles that I think hockey adapted because they removed the offside have really evolved in football in the last 10 or 15 years, especially defensively. But pressure on the ball and offside lines. So, I loved having those discussions with other sports. There's so much you can learn, but you're right. The whole gamut from culture to training styles to preparations for major tournaments to, how they deal with the heat, the cold, match, 90 minutes interchange, all those different things. They're all just great learning tools. And hopefully, they're things you can draw upon when you need them under pressure, especially.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. So why do you do it, Stage? Why do you coach?
I ask myself that question every day. I think I answered it at the beginning. When I started, when I was 23, 24 in coaching, it was my way of staying connected to the game. It's basically been my love and passion from the time I was a little kid. I remember getting up and watching basically every bit of football I could. When SBS came along, I was the person who was watching every game of National League, watching the World Game, watching every little. So I was just in my blood. And, I happened not to have the football career that I wanted in terms of a player, but just maintaining that contact and connection and, love for the game through coaching has been, a blessing. I've said it a lot of times. You feel it's fortunate you're able to do something you love every day of your life, and the fact that people want to pay you for it is even better. But no, I just love the game and having such a strong, being a first generation Aussie, you almost have even a greater connection, I guess, to Australia and wanting to be proud of where you've grown up and your homeland. So when you blend, I guess, those 2 points together, the passion for football and the passion for our country, and the fact that football's always been the underdog in this country and always been the one that we feel in, as I said, we have that inferiority complex. Yeah. It gives me more drive and motivation to want to prove ourselves and to prove that Australia can be one of the best footballing nations in the world.
Yeah. Staj, you mentioned before, so much of your coaching career has been spent in winning environments, which you go to a team and you had a year at the Mariners where things weren't so great and the learning opportunities there. You had that horrible ending to your journey with the Matildas, and we're not going to drill down into that right now. But to go from that willingness to that situation, which must have been horrific for you and your family, how important is it for coaches to develop resilience? And is that like a muscle? Is that something you can work on? Can you coach it? You coach your players to be more resilient. But I'm really keen to know how important you value resilience in your role as a coach.
Yeah, at the first part of that question, I wasn't sure if you were if you were going to mention the word, but I think out of all the attributes anyone needs to have to be successful in any part of life, but especially sport, is resilience. And it's the kind of thing that I discuss with players so often on their journey. As youngsters, as 15, 16, 17-year-olds, there are so many hurdles that come in your way, whether it's injury, whether it's not being selected for a team, whether it's playing in the position you don't like, whether it's whatever the case may be, whether it might be different issues in your personal life at that particular point. There's so many things that are going to get thrown in our way at different times. So I guess I had to fall back on a little bit of the things that I'd been preaching and then obviously live. It was the first time in my life I'd been sacked. And, at 45, I didn't have other experiences to fall back on, but I knew that, I had to find a way to bounce back up on my feet and have another go. I knew that wasn't going to be the place where I lie down and die from a football perspective and from a coaching perspective. I knew that I had more to give, and there was so much more I wanted to give back to the sport and maintain, as I said before, my connection with the sport. So, I was very fortunate and grateful that Mike Charlesworth and Sean Milcamp gave me the opportunity, having not been an A-League coach before. Thrown into the deep end. They were, I think, one win out of 21 at the time when I came in as interim coach towards the end of that season. So it was, out of the frying pan and into the fire. But I loved it. From the first day I set foot at the Mariners, I loved the club. Have that regional experience and that connectivity to the local community. It's just different to a capital city. You just really have that affection and connection with a local community. And that's why I think that clubs like the Central Coast and Newcastle in particular are so important for the A-League. For me, we should be spreading throughout more regions throughout the country, because football is the one sport that's played everywhere. But certainly, going back to that resilience question, it is probably, in my opinion, even more important than talent in who's going to make it in any facet of life, but particularly football.
Yeah, you've got to keep being prepared to pick yourself up and go again, don't you?
Yeah, 100%.
Al, if I can ask you, if I can flip that around, because you then had I think, a 3-year contract at the Mariners, and at the end of last season, which was, they finished third, probably the best position that the Mariners had finished. Some wonderful football, some great development of talent there, and you resigned from that role. And again, I don't want to drill down into the details of that, but how as a coach do you know that it's time to walk away?
Yeah, look, it was there was a lot of factors that went into the decision. As I said, even without going into the whole multitude of reasons, just driving up and down 2 hours each way, 6 days a week isn't the easiest, and sacrificing so much of your family time. Just 4 hours a day in the car, 24 hours a week is already a starting point that makes it tough. But as I said, once I got to work, I absolutely loved it. The team up there, the staff I had that I worked with were the best staff I've ever worked with. So engaged with the team, so aligned. The players were brilliant. But for me, having done that was sort of 2.5 years of A-League, I just felt that I wanted a new challenge and wanted something new. I wasn't sure what that was. I wasn't sure where I was going to land. COVID hit almost immediately after that, so we've been in 4 months of lockdown. But I wasn't sure, but I knew that I wanted something different, and I wanted a new challenge. And again, I'm still not sure what that's going to be long term, even during this Philippines role and maybe after that. But I just know that I want something else and something new and different, exciting and And I have to say, at the moment, I'm probably the most excited I've been for a long time about this new challenge. Taking a team that hasn't done something before, that hasn't really had opportunities at major tournaments, and trying to see if we can help them get to a point that they've never got to before is really exciting. And we all can't wait to get there, to be honest.
Yeah. And the football gods have got a sense of humour, because you're in the AFC. You're in a group with Australia, and I've just worked out today that the nickname of the Philippines is the Malditas, not the Matildas. Sorry, let me say that again. The Malditas, which apparently means feisty ladies. That's quite remarkable, because you'll probably be based in the same hotel and all that. And I think play Australia in the second group game, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, it was always inevitable, wasn't it? We're always going to. I was watching and my daughter was there next to me, and we just looked at each other and just laughed and knew that it had to be. But to be honest, there's 5 spots up for the World Cup, and Australia's not counted as part of that number. So there's 12 countries going to that tournament, of which 11 are fighting for those 5 spots. So as important as the Asian Cup is, the big prize for us is ensuring that we get to that top 5 position. So the Matildas game is important, and maybe from a personal perspective, it carries that extra little bit of spice and fire. But for me personally, the first game that we play, Thailand and Indonesia game 3, really are the games for us to try and attack and get that win up so that we can move through to the quarterfinals and move to the next level. Australia's at a level where Australia and Japan have traditionally been the 2 strongest teams in the Confederation over the last 6 or 7 years. So that's going to be, an extremely tough game. We saw last week against Brazil that they're at a very high level, and when they turn it on, they're a match for any team in the world. But those games against Thailand and Indonesia are certainly going to be 2 games where we're going to have to be at our best to ensure we get to the quarterfinals.
Yeah. Again, well, good luck with that. We'll look forward to seeing the results come through. What have been your most enjoyable moments as a coach so far?
Look, there's so many, to be honest. I think there's quite a few that spring to mind. I think beating America for the first time with the Matildas was a massive day. And it was only at the Tournament of Nations, wasn't it, the World Cup or at the Olympics. But having not beaten them ever in history, and them being the number 1 team in the world almost entirely over the last 30 or 40 years, I think Germany were number 1 for a small period as well. But just for the team to know that they can beat the best team in the world on any given day, a massive moment of belief. And it's not that fake belief and false bravado. It's we can beat these guys, on any given day, and let's play them in the World Cup or World Cup final, and we know that we can beat them now. It's not something that hasn't happened before. That was a massive moment. Playing Brazil at the Olympics in front of 60,000 people sent chills down the spine. Still today, I think about the Brazilians singing their anthem and how passionate and emotional that was. It was just brilliant. And that happened to be the same stadium where the men's team had lost 7-1 to Germany the year before at the Men's World Cup. So I think had Brazil lost that night, I think they probably would have burnt the stadium. That was a massive moment. And I guess last year at Mariners, crowds were banned obviously for a long part of the season, and it only just returned in small numbers. But the couple of days where we had 10 or 12,000 people when we played Sydney FC and we had a 2-2 draw at home, and then Macarthur in the finals match when there was 12 or 13,000 people was just, a great day, great atmosphere. And again, just that, that reaffirmation that football really does belong in these regional areas, and the Central Coast really do deserve to have an A-League team and a strong A-League team.
Yeah, no, I love it. Okay, mate, what are some of the most valuable lessons you've learned in your coaching journey?
Look, I think humility and gratitude are probably the first 2 that spring to mind, and then probably resilience. I think being grateful, we lose perspective so quickly, and especially in Australia, we always want more. But just learning that sense of gratitude and appreciating the moment that we have, and appreciating what we've been given, and appreciating that it's probably a lot more than a lot of other people are given around the world, whether it's resources, whether it's opportunity, whether it's other things. We really do live in the best country in the world, and unless you've traveled, sometimes you don't realize that, and sometimes even when you have traveled, you forget about that we really do have more opportunity and more things at our disposal than a lot of other people around the world. And for me, humility is a big one. Always remembering where you came from, being humble and appreciating everyone along the journey, whether they're someone who's just starting out at a club, or whether there's someone who's been there for 10, 20 or 30 years, ensuring that everyone has that respect and equality around the group, and everyone has their, important value that they bring to the club, and how important they all are. So I think they're massively important things for me.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, mate. So then following on from that, what does success look like?
You're asking all the good questions. You've done this before.
I've learned to shut up after I've asked them as well.
Look, I'm a really sore loser. I'm a bit of a sook for about 24 or 48 hours after each loss. And for me, I've always, I used to get teased at school that it was win at all costs, but I've learnt that winning is important and success is important, but, it depends where you're coaching and at what time as to what success actually is. And, as I mentioned before at Hill Sports High, winning, we made a lot of finals in a row, but that wasn't how I actually judged how well we did. It was how many players went on to play A-League, W-League, Matildas, Socceroos, and how did we add enough tools for them to be successful at that level. So, success can carry so many different things, from development to winning to having a good environment to seeing people flourish and reach new levels that maybe they didn't even know they were capable of. I think that's really what success is. And I guess that goes back to sort of the teaching background. When you see a player or an athlete achieve something and have that satisfaction and reward, it really does give everyone else that sense of pride and achievement in having hopefully helped them in that journey.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. Thanks, mate. Okay, downhill run, one to go. So if you have one piece of wisdom you could offer coaches, whether they were in the beginning of their journey, in the middle of it, or coming towards the end of their journey, just the one. No, come on, mate, you don't mean that. Ernie Merrick said, check that the VAR's working. Sorry, let me get the straight face on. So if you have one piece of wisdom that you could offer to coaches, what would that be?
Oh, wow. Look, at the end of the day, it's got to be fun. You got to enjoy it because it's a tough job. Playing and coaching are for me almost totally different. Playing, you've got that really, really self-centered aspect of trying to improve yourself, and obviously you're part of a team and you're part of a group and all the things that go along with that. But as a coach, it can be a lonely experience. So you've really got to find that enjoyment and fun and reward in the process of whatever it is that you want to achieve. Is it the connection to the game? Is it winning? Is it whatever it is? But it has to be fun, because if it's not fun, it's just too tough a job.
It's not fun. It's just too tough a job. What a wonderful place to finish it. Alen Stajcic, head coach of the Philippines women's national team, heading off to the Asian Cup. Thank you very much, Al. Really, really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your wisdom. It's been a terrific conversation. And coaches around Australia, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
If you've enjoyed conversation with Alan, please go to footballcoachesoz.org.au. You can buy a membership, renew a membership, or just find out a whole bunch of great information. Have a wonderful day.